I'm Tass Mellis of The Starters.
This is Ben Golliver with the Open Floor Podcast.
Hi, I'm Kristen Ludlow from NBA Inside Stuff.
I'm OG Anunoby of the Toronto Raptors.
Hey, I'm Elena Donon, and welcome to the Double Clutch.
Double Clutch.
Double Clutch.
Double Clutch.
Double Clutch Podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, basketball fans of all ages, welcome to Double Clutch. My name is Huw Hopkins, and to the right of me on the screen there is the inimitable Josh Coyne, and on the other side of the screen over there is the ever handsome Nick Whitfield, and on the ones and twos, the producer who can control the maestro is Kirk Killick. How are we, gentlemen? Say hi, Kirk.
I'm personally good. It's a pleasure to be back on board Captain Kirk's ship and to feature above this tremendous setup. And I won't take it personally that you chose to use handsome for Nick.
I'm feeling good. I was worried that there may be enough games for the Knicks to dip under 500 before this pod, but I am delighted to join a Double Clutch podcast with the Knicks playing playoff basketball.
Of course, which we're going to get onto in just a moment. Kirk, do you want to say hello with one of your humorous drop sound effects?
Okay, next.
Next.
That's all we're getting. Cool. Fair play. So this is, we're going live on one of the crazier days in the NBA because, I mean, we've had games cancelled before. We've had games postponed in the history of the NBA. But about an hour before we went live, this communications came from the NBA that said New Orleans at Dallas, Boston at Chicago. The games are postponed. And of course, they're not the first games to be postponed this season. COVID is wreaking havoc on the NBA. Gentlemen, what are we doing here? Why are we even attempting to play basketball games at the moment?
Well, I want to see NBA basketball as much as everyone, all the NBA basketball fans out there. Many of us actually need it more than ever, really. But that being said, there are two parts to this conversation for me. Clearly, we're putting these unvaccinated athletes at more risk by having them unnecessarily sweat, breathe, push, and maybe even spit on each other for 48 minutes during a medical crisis. And then secondly, we're kind of going to reach a point where it looks like you're really kind of, if it happens routinely where you're fielding teams like the Sixers did the other night, and like it looked like Boston were going to the other night before Miami cancelled, you're going to start really hurting your product by fielding these kind of G League looking lineups on the absolute highest stage. So I think, I mean, if you were to field those kind of teams that looked like they were going to step onto the court the other night, in any other normal circumstances, that would probably be considered punishable by the league because you are rotating to the detriment of the product. So for those exact reasons, to answer your question, Huw, I don't know what we're doing.
What do you think, Nick? Should we shut the season down?
I don't think so. I mean, for monetary reasons, I think it's quite obvious why these games are still being played wherever possible. When a team can field the minimum number of players, they're kind of putting them out there. Do you know what it's really brought me back to, though, is must be some like 6 months ago now or whatever, and we were talking about the NBA 2K trailer, and we had a large section on this podcast about how detailed the bodily fluids were in the trailer. Little did we know how relevant those COVID-carrying bodily fluids were going to become.
Yeah, it's definitely becoming a worrying sign. And anytime someone, I don't know, I haven't seen any players spit on the side of a court, but anytime those mop people go in to try and clean up the floor as players fall over and stuff, and you just think, oh god, this is just get messy. There's sweat all over the floor. I can see people slipping in it, and someone's trying to clean it up with their bare hands, even though they've got gloves on and a mask and all that rubbish. But it does seem like, I don't know, maybe we're hitting an unusual point, because I remember right at the start of the season, there was a game postponed, and I questioned then why are we postponing it? Should it be just that team loses that game by like 20 points or something? Because we're going to have a lot of these for the next 5 months. Where we're going to have a lot of games that are going to be postponed or moved back. We're going to run out of months in the year before the Olympics happen. Of course, that's the big thing that the NBA has been trying to avoid, is clashing with the Olympics, so we can have Team USA go over to Tokyo this year. So realistically, are we going to have enough time to play all these games? Are we just going to have to do playoffs, like almost like we did last year on on regular season percentage rather than their win-loss record, and then we have a couple of play-in games? Obviously, the play-in games were scheduled in this year for a reason. So are we just going to see some of those games cancelled towards the end of the year, do you think?
So what you're essentially saying is they should be treated like GCSEs, and we go on teachers' estimates instead of actual exams.
That worked well last year, didn't it? Shout out to Tom Hall and all the other teachers who had to deal with that mess last year. But obviously in basketball terms, it's in some ways it's not half as important as the education of the future of our world. But at the same time, it's very important to nerds like us. So yeah, what do you think, Nick? Are we gonna see all teams play 72 games this year?
I think. I can't answer that question, but what I will say is that whatever they do, it's going to be heavily flawed and criticised because, right before we came on, I was talking with Josh about how you're quite likely going to end up with some games just by, if you look at the numbers in the US right now in terms of infection rates and hospitalizations and stuff, it's not going in the right direction. I heard an estimate earlier today that somewhere in the region of 30% of the NBA has had coronavirus at this point. And when you're sending these guys on road trips where they could be in 6 different hotels, which maybe and traveling in a big group through airports, the chances of infection are so high. And then these guys who, once they've had coronavirus and are carrying the antibodies, you're trying to enforce them to behave as though they could still catch it. And while we know that they can still be carriers, even if they can't be infected again, it just seems like whatever action the league tries to do, there's not going to be a great solution right now.
No, I agree. I mean, it almost feels like last year, this is benefit of hindsight, but it almost feels like last year they should have tried to finish the season almost, going from city to city. And now that we're reaching this second wave, perhaps this is the season that they should have put in a bubble, because of course that was incredibly successful last year. Mm-hmm. And arguably, yeah, you can't have it. How many players are in the league? 450, or is that increased recently? I feel like it increased recently. You can't have 500 players in a bubble for 6 months, let alone all the staff that would be needed to keep an entire regular season going. But should that have been a more considered option, Josh, do you think?
I think that you're right in saying that obviously they benefited from the fact that it was late in the season and they didn't have to invite every team to the bubble. You're also right, though, in that it now seems wild that they kind of used their chance to have a bubble. I mean, that was their chance. Players, you'd have a hard time convincing them. It was a huge logistical masterwork. But it's also a huge undertaking to redo the bubble. And I know that the biggest challenge would be convincing those NBA players to make the sacrifice again, beyond their professional sacrifice. Under such strange circumstances, they were trying to adapt and they played at a really, really high level, really entertaining product. They'd also be making a real personal sacrifice of leaving, many of which, they have a lot of young families and they'd be leaving there behind for months. I assume for a much longer period of time than the last bubble. And when you saw guys talking about that in the last bubble, they were saying, well, I'm not doing this again, or I can't wait to get home. And even though they wanted to be as professional as possible, they wanted to compete their natural competitors. They were desperate to get home. Most of them were so relieved to get knocked out of the playoffs, and you don't want to see that again. So I think that was their absolute one chance to do the bubble. I think the only way that they'd be able to convince them to do it is if they were able to find a way to last long enough to eliminate people from playoff contention and then do a March Madness style tournament inside the bubble. But it is a mess, and it's really hard to point in the right direction. And I assume it's such a headache for the people who run this league.
Go on, Nick.
I was just going to say to Josh, he's having a bubble, mate. The one solution that I thought, well, it's not really a solution, but it just may have helped. I was listening to the Brian Windhorse podcast earlier, and they made some really good points in that compared to Major League Baseball and the NFL, there are two major factors that make it much more difficult for the NBA. One is the number of games compared to the NFL. So once you get into trying to delay games, you get them suddenly piling up because there's so many of them. Mm-hmm. And compared to Major League Baseball and the NFL, the squad sizes are so small that you only need a relatively small outbreak within your team, and you're struggling to even put a team together. Yeah. So I wonder if preemptively what the league could have done just to stack the odds in its favor a little bit more was had a special provision just for this season with like maybe an extra 3 positions in a squad where you get a like G League level salary and you can hire 3 extra players just to stack the odds that even if a team has a number of players out, they can still actually field a team, and that just be accepted as it's the same for everyone. You have to play if you have the numbers and go from there. And if you can't field a squad, you lose a game. We move on. Yeah. That's like the only way I think it could have worked slightly better even.
Yeah. Sorry.
Go on. No, go on, Josh.
Well, like I said, I mean, they benefited last year from where they were at in the season. And I think that any of the suggestions that we've given, including what Nick said, I think a lot of them actually would. There was a lot of talk, kind of bogus chatter about an asterisk. Why have I lost the ability to say that word? Asterisk season last year. And actually, compared to what we would probably have to offer now, if we did have to cancel the season and shrink it down into another bubble in such early stages of the season, it would be way more of a, it wouldn't be taken seriously over time. And I think that it's a real shame, and it's hard to know where to go.
Yeah, I'm not sure where we'll end up. I personally see the postponed games being cancelled. But I mean, I think it possibly would have been a better option to go with a bubble in the first place. But obviously the logistics of that are difficult. But as Richard Fang said in the Twitch chat at the moment, Stephen Adams did say at the time, "It's not Syria, mate." It was they were very well looked after. So maybe if they'd been paid a bit extra, maybe they would turn around and gone for another season. But of course, we can't talk just about basketball or the cancellation of basketball games at the moment, because there's been. I think it would be remiss of us to talk to not talk about the final season of America, of course, because it is entering the final stages where it feels like the whole thing is going to burn to the ground, very sadly. But we've seen some crazy things in the past week, and I don't think it's our job to sort of go into the nitty gritty details of it. But I think some of the cool things we've seen is that. We've obviously seen the final calculations of the Senate votes in Georgia, where we've seen two people get voted out, including a WNBA owner in Kelly Loeffler. However, the team that she owns, the Atlanta Dream, are a big reason why they were voted out. However, within a few hours of that, because the Senate count then went to the Senate to eventually be ratified, I guess, to make sure that they've got the future Senate sorted. We then saw Trump essentially send send troops, send public mercenaries to the Senate to sort of overthrow it almost. And all they did is walk around like tourists with a VIP pass and sort of, desecrate a few things. And of course, we did see the loss of 5 people's lives, which is very tragic indeed. But I wondered, gentlemen, if you could talk a little bit about the activism that we've seen from the NBA and the WNBA in this regard. We've also seen the news come out about the officer who shot Jacob Blake. He didn't end up receiving any sort of sanctions on him whatsoever. And I think it's been another week where even though there's been a lot of issues in the NBA, in basketball, trying to get on the court, I think we've also seen more reasons to be proud of the basketball community. Josh, I know you've written a lot about the social justice work of NBA players in the past. What do you make of the actions in the past week or so in America?
Well, firstly, I thought it was excellent to see from the WNBA. I mean, this is the year of unprecedented things. That's the code. That's the buzzword. But this is the absolute meaning of that. I mean, we had professional athletes coming into the playoffs with T-shirts campaigning against their owner for her political seat. And, they managed to influence a way to take political power away from their owner, which is, of course, chef's kiss. It's another example of the WNBA players kind of leading the way in terms of the social justice movement and having the willingness to stand up. We spoke about it a while back, and I think that I suggested there's probably lower stakes with the level in which the WNBA is sponsored, and there are people endorsing it, less people endorsing it. There's a lower risk aspect to it, but they have absolutely went above and beyond on continuously, and it's been fantastic. In terms of the other thing, I was going back and forth. Sorry to go on a tangent here, but I was going back and forth on, how emotionally invested in this nonsense that's going on overseas really should I be. I think part of it is because we do follow this league, which is based in that country. Also that we're all quite online. And everything does have an effect on what we end up experiencing as consumers and as a country. I think that it was an absolute disgrace what happened in the Capitol. There's a great deal of entitlement and corruption that day. The country has a crooked, empty, spoiled, toothless little slug of a man at the helm, to be completely honest. And he's been sowing the seeds for this kind of activity for the last 5 years. Most of what I saw from NBA players was obviously condemning this and acknowledging the obvious parallels between this and the BLM marches, which actually had a purpose and actually had a point to them, as opposed to this, like you said, this absolute aimless nonsense tourism into the Capitol before just going in and shouting a load of empty nonsense. It was really frustrating to see, but maybe I can start to forget about it because I'm not on Parler. So the sooner I don't hear that clown's name, the better.
Yeah, I think that very well put. I heard a lot of conversation within the NBA community and the basketball community. And I think Doc Rivers said it best, is that if it was black people going up to the Senate, I think we would have seen, a lot more of those activists, I say, be shot down or at least be called. Let's be honest. I think they would have had a tough time actually getting in the building, and I think that goes to the double standards of the United States of America. So how impactful then are these scenes for? Do you think will be for basketball players and NBA players and WNBA players going forward, Nick? Because of course we're not seeing this year. We're not seeing the words Black Lives Matter on the NBA basketball court like we did last summer in the bubble. So what do you think this type of activity will end up doing for our NBA players?
This is a subject that don't get me wrong. I like to laugh and joke about anything I possibly can, and this event was something I struggled to understand, struggled to treat in a light-hearted way as much as I try to do that with anything. There are three major talking points for me about this event, and the first, and I think it goes beyond the NBA, it's and the WNBA and the world of basketball. It's the degree to which the digital platforms we use and the world we now live in can diverge people to the extent that we're seeing in a lot of the world right now, be it in Brexit voting in our country, be it Trump supporters in America. These people who are so convinced of an election being rigged in one way, where the only evidence of rigging any election has actually been Donald Trump phoning the state of Georgia, asking them to find more votes magically somehow. And yet they are completely and utterly convinced that they are correct. And it is the other side, as they see it, that is somehow kind of being duped by the media and the elites of the world and stuff. It's a scary place to be right now, that people can willingly lose their lives for that sort of cause. I don't think you guys even went strong enough on the level of inequality it highlights. And I think it really shows why athletes across sports right now are pushing the Black Lives Matter movement, because it really is the epitome of white privilege to be able to storm a Capitol building, considered the bastion of democracy in the US, and be walked hand in hand by police officers on your way out. It honestly disgusted me to my very core watching that. It was a very surreal evening. And it feels like the way our news agenda works right now, the next day happens and it's almost like it hadn't happened. And this is a really historic event that I don't think should be brushed under the carpet. This is a Confederate flag was walked through the White House, something that never happened during the Civil War even. This is a real symbol of far right activity, and there couldn't have been a more powerful example of why social justice movements are important, and that the cause they're striving for and what they're fighting against is still very present in not only in America but around the world.
Yeah, very, very well put. Thanks for that. I think it is important to take this as seriously as we can. I think we do all have a joke about certain things, but yeah, there were some scary moments in the past week, and certainly anyone that we know, anyone that we have ever interacted with, we hope you're safe, and we hope the situation gets resolved there quickly, and we certainly are wishing the best for all of our friends in America, because it does seem like a very scary time there at the moment. It's going to be very awkward to try and transition into a next sort of section now, but I think it was important that we do touch on that. So thanks for your thoughts, guys. But we're going to get back onto the basketball court now. Try and move on onto some hopefully more lighthearted things that you can enjoy on a Monday night, which I assume was the first Monday night for a lot of people back at work. So yeah, apologies if we've done nothing but depress you for the first 20 minutes of the show. But let's get into what we're seeing in the NBA standings then, because I think, we do have the teams who are like, the Los Angeles Lakers are obviously way up there. I think the Los Angeles Clippers, they're doing very well, as we sort of expect. But there's a few teams that I think, we were a little bit questionable of at the start of the season or before the season. Or perhaps we just didn't think they had the stuff to actually reach the level that they have. Now, we're going to, of course, start every sentence with, it's very early in the season. But who are you liking at the moment, gentlemen? Because at the moment, I'm just going to read off the top few teams in each conference, the top 4 teams in each conference. We have the Philadelphia 76ers, 7-3. Matching them is Josh Coyne's Boston Celtics with 7-3. Close behind that is the Pacers at 6-4. And then we have the Magic at 6-4. And then in the Western Conference, we of course have the Lakers, which I think we're all pretty confident in today in that they're probably going to have one of the best regular season records this year. We have the Clippers slotted into that third spot, but then we have Ross McLeod's Suns. What the hell are they doing up there? I mean, yes, they went 8-0 in the bubble, but we didn't think that this was going to happen, did we, gentlemen? Who are you liking so far?
Well, Huw, what's your favourite song written by George Harrison?
Here Comes the Sun.
Here Comes the Suns, 7-3. They've started rolling much quicker than I anticipated. I did think, with the acquisitions that they made and the squad that they've built, that they'd have a really nice blend of leadership and youth and experience and, of course, a dynamite offense. But they've got into their groove 10 games in at a really, really impressive rate. Chris Paul obviously adds so much. Mikal Bridges had an absolutely huge jump last night. Unbelievable. Booker is incredible. Ayton playing at a decent rate. And then even guys like Jay Crowder, who is exactly what the Suns wanted from him, and he's showing why. I think he reported today that 14 teams courted him in the offseason. So he's playing a really important role. And I think that they're a really complete team. So I'm going to say, much to my chagrin from bigging up and making Ross McLeod's head too big, I'm going to say I think the Suns really are for real.
Yeah, it's I mean, it just goes to show that he probably I mean, the construction of that team in the offseason, adding Chris Paul, but also adding the role players that you just listed there, they've done the right things this season, which I think is something we haven't seen for several years before that. They have been slowly building, but I think it's been accelerated in the past 2 seasons. What about you, Nick? I mean, we're obviously going to get in slightly further down into the Eastern Conference. I'm sure you'll touch on your Knicks pretty shortly. But what about at the top of the standings at the moment? Who is for real?
One team I watched play against the Knicks early in the season and really caught my eye was the Pacers. And the play of Sabonis in particular, who is really having a career season so far. He looks in incredible shape. He is showing decision-making and playmaking that we haven't really seen from him before. And what's interesting is it was just like for the last few seasons, there was a little question mark that was obviously increasingly disappearing over whether it was the right decision to sort of favour Sabonis over Miles Turner. And I really don't think like there's any reason for that question mark to exist anymore. I even like Miles Turner, but Sabonis is playing at a level we've never seen from Turner. So, I like the Pacers. I like the roster they have. Obviously, they have Oladipo back now. I've really liked what I've seen from them.
So I noticed neither of you have... for your who is for real, what team is for real early in the season, neither of you have picked the Philadelphia 76ers. Josh, I understand why, because you're a Celtics fan. But the Philadelphia 76ers, we all had high hopes for them last season. And, a couple of people, including myself, booked them into the finals even. And this year, I think people were a bit more tepid coming into the season, despite the fact that they've actually really sorted out their roster quite nicely. So what about the 76ers then? Do they stand a chance of actually, at least reaching the conference finals, do you think? Yeah,
well, as you touched upon, we all had massive expectations for them last year. And I think the expectations really matter. Last year, that hype obviously would have had an impact. Only with less hype, they've got off to a 7-3 start. The main conversation is, of course, Joel Embiid's play: 23 points, 12 rebounds, and almost 2 blocks a game. He's shooting less from the 3-point line, and he's actually making use of himself where he really has those interior advantages, and he's making those smaller defenders pay because he is shooting it more consistently than ever too. Most importantly, though, we're getting an uplift in social media cheekiness from Joel Embiid, which is always a bonus for the league.
I think he's at his best when he's more fun on social media, isn't he? I think depending on how fun his social media is, that's a reflection of how well he's playing. What about you, Nick? Talking about the 76ers particularly, are they that much improved on last year? Of course, they've changed their roster a little bit. They've gone, they had that year where they had JJ Redick and who's the other shooter? I'm completely blank. Marco Bellinelli, was he on the team that year?
Yeah.
And then they sort of got rid of all their shooters, and they went really big for a few seasons. And they've still got good size there, but then this season, I think they've brought in Seth Curry, they've brought in Danny Green. They've got some shooters to put around the two bigs in, of course, Joel Embiid, but also in Ben Simmons, who is 6'10" himself. So what do you make of the roster construction this season?
I am actually going to group the Sixers with another team who it doesn't really matter to me what I see in the regular season. It only matters what I see from them in the playoffs. And the other team is the Bucks, in that both teams have been really good, but it's no surprise to me. We've seen it before. Philly obviously doing it in a slightly different way this year, slightly tweaked roster. Full credit to Doc Rivers as well, getting seemingly the best out of the players on that roster. But until I see them look convincing in the playoffs, it really doesn't matter what I see. Obviously, they're going to fly into the playoffs. No one's doubting that. But again, it really doesn't matter what we see in the regular season from those teams because they're already proven winners in the regular season. That's fair.
I think it's fair to have those assumptions, and I'm definitely with you on the Milwaukee Bucks. To me, the 76ers are just look different this year from what I've seen of them. I mean, of course,
and they've got your boy Tyrese Maxey.
Tyrese Maxey, that's the guy I wanted to mention. This guy, 39 points the other night. He is such a pest. Like, you see him chasing other opposing point guards up and down the court for the full 94 feet. And he's fun. He's explosive. And he seems to really enjoy himself out on the court as well. You see him smiling a lot. So, yeah, if there's anyone to watch this year, I'm going to enjoy watching him.
Well, Huw, I mean, we were both on some of those pre-draft meetings, I believe. And my biggest takeaway from the whole experience, actually, and I think I posted this a few times on Twitter, is how unbelievably engaged Maxey was. He stood out as the quite obvious, he was really committed to the cause. He was super engaging. All he kept talking about was the hard work he wanted to put in. He was really interested. I mean, I know his willingness to talk to reporters really doesn't mean anything, but he seemed super excited, super ready to go. And I think that really has reflected in his play. It's really special the way he started.
I mean, we're gonna skip a few points because talking about that one rookie. What about another rookie in this year's class? LaMelo Ball seems to be the thing. He seems to have it all. So we've obviously seen his older brother Lonzo playing in the game for a couple of seasons now, and in many ways, I think they have quite similar games in many respects. But to me, it seems like LaMelo has a nose for scoring a bit more and has more of an attack in his mind, whereas I think Lonzo is perhaps more of a pure point guard, even though I don't really necessarily see him as a pure point guard. But he looks to make the right play all the time, whereas LaMelo is like, nah, I'm gonna do what I want on this one, there seems to be a bit more free flowingness to his game. Well, what are there any other rookies that have stood out to you? Where do we put LaMelo Ball on your list, Nick? I know you've seen him or followed him before he joined the NBA as well.
Yeah, so LaMelo, when I did a pod with Mike and we talked about rookie of the year choices, and LaMelo Ball was my pick because of the role he was going to play in Charlotte and the freedom he was going to be given, and the experience they brought into that roster with people like Hayward and stuff. So there wasn't going to be a huge responsibility on him to be the guy winning games night after night, but he can still come in, do what he does best. I think his game translates to the NBA much better than international leagues, like where he's playing in the NBL, because he likes to push the ball in transition, find runners and stuff. So I really like his game, actually, and there's a number of ways he can improve. I think, like, if he really wanted to, he could really rethink his shot form that seems to run in the Ball family to become a much more consistent shooter. But yeah, I mean, it's hard not to like what we're seeing from him.
Yeah, for all the confidence LeVar Ball had in his three boys, I think the one thing we can all agree on is he blessed them with terrible shot mechanics. But they are slowly being worked on a professional level, and Lonzo is looking much better the past few months. And yeah, I think LaMelo will hopefully get some structured help over there in Charlotte as well. Are there any other players, whether they're rookies or not, are there any other players that sort of you think haven't received the praise that they deserve in this early season?
I mean, I touched upon mine, is that I think that the biggest kind of impact that someone has had for who he left and who he has joined is Jay Crowder, in the sense that I think he just was exactly what that team needed, obviously, as well as Chris Paul. And his absence in Miami is even louder than his presence in Phoenix. I think that they really could do with a body like Jay Crowder, who brings what he does to the game in Miami. Another guy who, you know what, he probably is getting the requisite amount of attention. And I feel like I might need to ask for a homerism pass from both of you. Do I get one?
Go for it.
Please.
Okay, so Payton Pritchard has been really exciting. Pritchard is a bit of, he's really kind of doing wonders for four-year guys. The perception of four-year guys is either that they're going to come in and be really steady and, really strong pros, or they're just not special enough to have made it to the league yet. And Pritchard really has this unbelievable self-belief, considering the situation he immediately jumped into for a team that's supposed to be, was an Eastern Conference Finals team, and he was meant to be deep into the rotation. He was picked deep into the draft, and he never loses his dribble. He is willing to make humongously ballsy shots, and he drives to the basket with serious aggression and hounds his matchup. So I've really loved what I've seen from Payton Pritchard, and it's a weird one whether he's under the radar, because Boston Celtics fans do have a history of massively overbuzzing their fringe guys.
I mean, we only have to look at the Twitch chat to see that Payton Pritchard was mentioned several times before Josh even got a chance to talk about him. So he's obviously a fan favorite of the Boston fans that we have in the chat today. But Nick, what about you? Who is your favorite under-discussed player, and why is it Keldon Johnson of the San Antonio Spurs?
He did not feature on my list, funnily enough. But
How?
I do have a list. I'm going to give you my list, and you tell me who you want to talk more about. So I have Larry Nance Jr. for the Cavs. They have been better than anyone expected, mostly because of the backcourt of Sexton and Darius Garland, which has
Sexland.
You mean Sexland?
Exactly, has become known as Sexland. So I just wanted to say that on the podcast, really. But Nance has been a really impressive defender, really playing his minutes well. He's caught my eye. Vucevic, no one talks about the Magic, but he is having an incredible season so far, playing incredibly well, shooting the ball incredibly well. RJ Barrett for the Knicks. Everyone's talking about Julius Randle because of the eye-popping numbers. But Barrett is looking much closer to what the Knicks thought they were drafting. Sabonis I talked about a bit earlier. Chris Boucher for the Raptors. he started showing flashes last season, but this year he's shown he can be a floor spacing, rim defending, rebounding, like a really versatile big. Jarrett Allen, I think a lot of people predicted he was going to become the better of the bigs in Brooklyn. And Jeremy Grant is getting buckets for the Pistons.
Oh, my God.
Jeremy Grant, no one really anticipated him being this much of a weapon. He's unbelievable.
I watched the Pistons in a preseason game against the Knicks, and I felt quite sad watching Blake Griffin, who at one point the lane completely opened to him. He drove to the middle and then laid it up just because he seemed to have no lift out of his knees. And it really made me sad watching Blake. And it's a bit weird watching that team with him on it and Jeremy Grant being the kind of go-to guy on that team.
So I'm trying to open up Basketball Reference for Jeremy Grant's numbers because I wanted to read them out to you, but for some reason my frustrating computer is not letting me.
25 points per game, 47% from the field, 38% from three, over 6 rebounds, 1.3 blocks a game, 6.2 rebounds, but obviously he's shooting threes a lot, so he's not round the hoop a lot, so that's why his numbers are always lower than you think. But yeah, really good athlete, good defender, and the Nuggets have disappointed without him on the team this year, so interesting.
What's his VORP, Nick? What's his VORP?
Don't have that in front of me. I'm sure I can get it. No, I'm not going to look it up.
I think the thing that is exciting for Jeremy Grant on the Detroit Pistons is the fact that perhaps you guys can help me. I don't think the Pistons have had what is he, 25, 26, something like that. He's 26. He's still young. He's barely entering his prime. And I can't remember the last time the Pistons had a player like that. They really went all in on Blake Griffin a few years ago. It felt like they were struggling for a few seasons before that as well with Andre Drummond.
Are you saying Derrick Rose is not in his prime, Huw?
I'm suggesting that, yes. Sorry to all the Derrick Rose stans out there, but yeah, I think that guy might have passed it. It's really refreshing to see Detroit fans have something to cheer for because I'm not going to lie, the future looks pretty bleak for them. Much like your New York Knicks from a year or two ago. You touched on a couple of the Knicks players, but here's your chance to have your Homer moment. What are you liking about them? I mean, you mentioned RJ Barrett is sort of going under the radar, but what's different? What's happening to your New York Knicks?
Well, let's look back at the Pistons, and I've said for a long time on this pod and in articles and various other things that I've been okay with the Knicks losing for a number of years now, as long as they're rebuilding in the right way. What I was desperate for them to avoid is what you see with the Pistons, where you end up with a Blake Griffin at the end of his career on big money, and it's just kind of a bit pointless trying to do that. And the Knicks had to take a big ego hit, obviously, not trying to or accepting they weren't going to land marquee free agents. But what they need to do instead, and what we're seeing now, particularly in full credit to Tibbs mainly, is the start of what can be considered a culture that other players may be attracted to. And it's sometimes basketball is simpler than we try and make it. And I think that's what we're seeing with the Knicks. They play at one of the slowest paces in the league. The defensive numbers are really good. Offensive numbers in general are bad. Isolation offensive numbers very good. So what that tells you is the style of play they're going to is the players like Barrett and Randall. He's creating the sets to put them in situations where they can do what they're good at and not overcomplicate the offense. Just like there's been more shooting on the team. Austin Rivers has taken over games since he started playing. Julius Randle, it's hard to say enough about how well that guy's playing. He's honestly, I think he had a mark recently where only him and Oscar Robertson had ever started an NBA season with that many points, assists, and rebounds. And I know that pisses off Russell Westbrook. RJ Barrett getting to the rim incredibly well. Alfred Payton looked good. Emmanuel Quickly is better than advertised coming out the draft. Nerlens Noel accepted his role behind Mitchell Robinson, and just the roster makes a lot more sense. We don't have every power forward in the NBA this season.
Yeah, I think Knicks on the up is. I didn't think I'd say that, but Knicks on the up. So keep your eye out for those. We're gonna very
just
quickly.
one last thing.
Okay,
it struck me as sorry Timberwolves fans, but when you think back to coming out of Tibbs's season with the Timberwolves, his final season, and it seemed like him and Jimmy Butler were the villains there. But retrospectively, now with what's happened for both of those people and how not good the Timberwolves have been, it looks very different. That situation could be interpreted very differently.
Very true.
Many issues in Minnesota. We're going to very briefly touch on New York, but not the New York that we've just been discussing. For so many years, Melo was the guy that we just used to crap on this podcast. It seems like almost every other podcast, it's now Kyrie. What? He decided to miss a game the other day, and there's not been much explanation by him publicly that I've seen, at least. I think there was a statement that just I can't remember who reported it. Apologies for this, but it was just sort of he didn't want to play. What's going on there?
I feel as though I hardly have it in me to talk about Kyrie anymore. But he's got some stuff that he has talked about in the past that he might have had to deal with. He's obviously a very compassionate guy off the court in terms of the work he does. But he has a tendency to not consider the things that you should consider important as a professional athlete important enough to do, such as informing your coach that you won't be turning up to a game. So what's happening, I think, is exactly what people knew would happen with Kyrie. I think they're still going to have a really good season once they hit a kind of run of consistency if the season continues. But quite frankly, it's you take the good and the bad with Kyrie, and that kind of thing is the bad.
I have sympathy with him in terms of the public sphere of it, because obviously the guy is quite a private guy. And even though he has the antics of someone who is a celebrity and enjoys messing around in the spotlight, actually I get the impression his personality is one that is more reserved and would prefer to just go about his business. I also worry that during times like this, the NBA Twitter sort of jumps on him as if he's doing something wrong, when actually I think, I believe he missed the game it was the day after the Jacob Blake news came out, and I know that a lot of these social justice issues are very close to him, and whether he was struggling to deal with that mentally in terms of his health. I don't think he necessarily owes an explanation to fans or to the media, but at the same time, I think he possibly does owe some explanation to his employer and his manager, being Steve Nash, the coach, who I felt sorry for because he just looked a little bit perplexed when asked those questions. Nick, do you have anything you'd like to sort of add to that in this confusing situation?
Well, he's just a weird guy, isn't he? He either... There's been so many things with him in the past few years where he either needs to get a publicist who can help him with understanding how these things will come across, even if they are not interpreted by the media and fans as he expects them to be, or he should just start. I don't think he's stupid. So I feel like he knows how a lot of this stuff will come across, and not playing in an NBA game and not bothering to tell your coach that you're not playing or why is it's a sort of like I think it's a bit patronizing to think he doesn't know how that will come across, because like even if I was coaching an under-16 team and someone couldn't play, I'd expect them to give me the courtesy of telling me they couldn't play in a game. But when you start adding up the various things that have been said, I remember before the season there was a quote. I can't actually, to be fair, remember if it was Kyrie or KD who said it. But when you start putting things together, and the quote I'm talking about was one of the two said something along the lines of they didn't really see Steve Nash as the coach, and they'd be sort of doing it as a group. When you hear that, and then you hear the fact they're just choosing not to play in games and not bothering to tell Nash, it's a bit disrespectful when you start putting those things together.
Yeah, and it was, I believe it was Kyrie who said that, and it falls into a long line of that kind of comment. And I think that generally, a lot has been said about his relationship with the media and things like that. But I think quite simply, the guy just doesn't consider the right things important. And I'm fairly sure he doesn't consider the fact that he reports to his coach important. I don't think he considers the thoughts of the media important, of course. Unfortunately, he really should care about how his organisation that employs him to benefit. Frankly, Huw, you kind of touched upon it. He does benefit from stardom, but he wants to avoid the difficult parts of it by simply dismissing it. And unfortunately, that doesn't serve his reputation well. Whether he cares about that's another thing. But I truly think the best players in NBA history have found a way to have a really strong relationship with the media and their organisation, which kind of really helped them just be furious competitors in the right environment. So I just hope he doesn't continue to create a circus for Brooklyn, and they can really make the most of the unbelievable depth and talent they have in that squad.
Absolutely. So from one silly nonsense to another, Nick, what have you got for us in Nick's silly nonsense this week?
Well, it is a double header this week, and I am particularly excited. So this week, with talk surfacing of the NBA expanding, adding new teams, which locations from anywhere in the world should be rewarded with teams, and what should the team names for those cities be? Wrong answers only.
Huw, have you got one?
You go first.
Okay, so I'm going to... you said anywhere in the world.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm going to another continent. I'm going to Antarctica, where there are 70 bases for humans in Antarctica. And I chose one at random because I think the entire continent has been starved of professional sport over time. So I've gone for the Esperanza base, and I'm calling my team the Esperanza Emperors, based on the penguin. There obviously could be some travel issues, and there might be some extreme scientific flaws in my plan, but I don't want to hear any of that. It's the Esperanza Emperors for me.
That's a good one. You went remote, no doubt about that. I'm probably going to go bigger city, to be honest, and a team that hasn't, a city that hasn't had a professional basketball team in a few years, but it was possibly one of the best cities to have basketball, and that's Birmingham. I didn't come up with a nickname for it.
I'm assuming you're meaning UK and not Alabama.
Birmingham in the UK, yes, not Alabama. I think we don't need any more southern NBA teams. No offense to Texas. I'm thinking it's going to have to be Birmingham. What we call it, I mean, we could resurrect some of the old BBL names, and bullets maybe. I'd like to see some right in the center of England that's really accessible to everybody.
So the opposite of the Esperanza Emperors.
Yeah, we need a fan base for one of them at least to balance out the profit sharing.
So are you suggesting that the Esperanza Emperors are a small market team and they won't be able to attract the talent?
They're like you said, it's a bit like San Antonio. The whole community will get behind them, but because there's no other pro sports teams there. But yeah, I don't think it'll be one of the big money makers. Maybe I'm wrong.
Right.
So I came up with a few potential ideas here, and you'll see a pattern in the places I'm choosing, that they all have names of interest to me. So my first one is the hometown of Larry Bird, the French lick Hicks, is what I've gone for. Second one is, there is a town in Turkey called Batman. And so I have gifted them the team of the Batman and Robins. There is a town in Madagascar called Go 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 Go. So I've created the Go 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 Girls. In Scotland, there is. Don't worry, Kirk, I'm getting there. In Scotland, there is a place called Lost. So I have the Lost Smoke Monsters. Shout out to Lost. In Texas, there is a place called Needmore. So I have the Needmore Cowbells, which, if you haven't seen that Saturday Night Live skit, you should. And finally, and this is one for you, Kirk, we have in North Carolina, there is a town called Why Not. So I have the Why Not Next Questions, who, as part of their founding, just get given Russell Westbrook.
Fantastic.
Okay, second part of the double header, and I'm excited. I saw Tom Hall in the chat. One thing to look out for any viewers on Twitch or YouTube is when he is on the pod, look how immaculately his bed is made. So here's my question. We're all aware of Tom Hall's elite bed making, but who in the NBA would you speculate is the best bed maker?
Well, of course, it's hard really to compare anyone to a Hall of Fame talent like Tom Hall. He's obviously
Tom Hall of Fame.
Yes, he does it all. He does it on both ends of the bed. I don't know what that means.
This is taking a doctor.
Okay,
you can tell we're approaching 10 o'clock.
Okay, let's just. I'll just do my answer. It's Ricky Rubio. I think he's got great vision. He seems like someone who really cares, and he'd really want to leave a really good impression in terms of nice folding. He'll plump up your pillows. Maybe he'll even leave a little hotel chocolate for you at the end.
See, for me, I went with someone who demands perfection, because nobody wants a messy bed. I think when I think of making my bed, I think of one of my parents coming in and sort of saying, what is this? This is a mess. You need to tighten this up and, really get it much tidier. And someone who I think would absolutely be on it at all times is Chris Paul, to the point where he would annoy people about how important making a bed is. He would be the army sergeant of bed making, and I honestly think my bed would be better for it.
You'd wake up, and as soon as your head rises from the pillow, he'd be criticizing the dent that you've left.
And telling on me to the refs if I put the sort of label at the wrong end or something.
Perfect.
I went in a slightly different direction, and I went with someone whose grooming standards are so consistently immaculate that I just speculate it runs throughout their life, and that is Kyle Kuzma, who, funnily enough, also features on my list of he's behind Nick Van Exel, though, in NBA players who look a bit like cats to me. And
I'm going to Google them right now.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned...
We need to do a post about this.
You mentioned Army Sergeant earlier, Huw. My all-time selection for bed making is the guy who, on this very podcast, won greatest shoulders in the NBA history, which is David Robinson, who served time in the US Navy. I can only imagine his bed as a deeply devout Christian man, military history. That bed is getting made. He's going to make everyone else's bed within a 3-mile radius. It's going to be precision every time.
He's on fire!
And you could say the same maybe for Greg Popovich, who was also in the military, right? But as if you
I just think with Greg Popovich, after too many wines, he just wouldn't give a damn. He wouldn't even get into the bed; he would sort of pass out on top of it. We are skipping a few points tonight because we're rapidly running out of time. Clearly, we went long on all the social justice stuff, but there was a fantastic picture which I'll make sure we retweet from the Double Clutch account again. Oh, is that the one? That's fantastic. Of the immortal Greg Popovich jumping up and down, angry at a call. So we're gonna go through to just do a couple of quick fire questions. These are questions from Discord. If you're not following us on Discord, make sure you do head over to someone give me the link. There we go. discord.me/double clutch. And you can join the community and you can get involved with the conversation throughout the entire week, where we have lots of conversations. The past couple of days we've been chatting about the pretty cool Sky Sports watch along game that they did the other night with the Heat Check guys. That was fun to watch. I tuned in and out of that a few times. But there's also been a few questions that some of our regular listeners have fired up to us. So we'll go pretty quick fire with these because we're running out of time, and I know Kirk likes to get to bed pretty early these days. So from Ross, we had Raptors and Nuggets. Should alarm bells be ringing with these teams? They're not performing terribly well out of the gate. I'll just check the latest standings. Nuggets are 5-5. And the Raptors, who were champions the season before last, are 2-7. Time to panic, guys?
Well, I think that for the Nuggets, I don't necessarily think that they should be massively worried. I think the workload of their star players is really heavy, so that is a concern. They don't have the luxury of Jokic double-doubles. They need Jokic double-doubles to stay afloat in many games. I think that that's obviously a problem, but it's so early in the season. They obviously haven't hit the ground running in the way that they would have hoped after such a successful bubble. But like I said, early days and a long way to go.
Any thoughts, Nick?
I think of the two, initially I was a bit worried about the Nuggets. And obviously, anytime you lose Jeremy Grant, you're going to struggle. But
MVP.
The thing is, they were getting. I was watching the Nuggets games, and they were getting MVP kind of level performances out of Jokic, and still losing games, and that's why I would have been a bit concerned. They've turned it around. Watched them beat my Knicks the other day, and I think it was a bit of a quirk of the games they were playing, their early record. The Raptors, however, I'd be a little more worried about. They're getting a lot out of Chris Boucher, as I talked about. Van Vliet is scoring incredibly well. It's a little bit more challenging for me to see how. Obviously, Siakam's disappointed. Tom in the chat completely agree, and I just start to worry about maybe they've reached their point. Obviously, Kyle Lowry is way up there in age now, and is it time for them to hit the reset button? It might be.
Yeah.
I said at the time, and I'll say it again, clearly the Spurs were the winners of the Rosen trade. Moving on, we've got Richard Fang. He asked the top 3 MVP candidates. His are Jokic, Luka, and Bradley Beal. What are your thoughts on that as a top 3, gentlemen?
Well, firstly, I just want to say that the previous thing that you said, if it was a tweet, you would have one of those Trump disclaimers saying that you should be wary of it. But anyway, right now I've got Embiid as my front runner. I think that we touched upon it. He's really a different animal this year, much to the better team around him, but also he's being really, really aggressive and seems really locked in. I've got Jokic, who also is balling at a really high level, but like Nick said, they're losing games and they've currently got a 500 record. So I really like it when it leads to team success, like with Embiid. And then finally, in third place, I've got Mr. Steph Curry, We said that he'd have to go supernova, and he really has done on a few times this year. He's clearly leading this team, and I think he might have a few more of those great games in him as the Warriors surge to the top spot in the West, as I stated at the start of the season.
The 6-4 Golden State Warriors. Nick, any thoughts on a top 3 MVP?
Yeah, so the issue I have with that list is that not many of them are winning basketball games, which is half of winning the award, as is the kind of actual reality of it. So I think you have to throw LeBron into the conversation. It's boring. It's been done before, but he's so good. We see it again and again. I'm going to throw in one that I think will bring delight to Mr. Coyne, which is Jaylen Brown, who, if the narrative goes right and the Celtics finish top or second in the East, he's been their best player this season, and we haven't seen him play this well. So I think I could imagine a world in which the narrative twisted for him to win it. And someone else to throw in. Again, I'm going to go slightly unorthodox. If the Suns are still up there in the standings at the end, Devin Booker may be the type of person who, again, the narrative could build behind to, oh, isn't this new and exciting? The Suns are good.
That's sort of who I've got.
Sorry. Yeah, you know that Jaylen was the first name that came to my head, but I'd already used my Homer pass. So continue, Huw.
I'm with you on Devin Booker. I think he's going to be in the top 3 running towards the end of the season. But speaking of Jaylen Brown, there was a great article by Charlie Liptrot that went up live on doubleclutch.uk in the past few days. Jaylen Brown has taken the leap, but what does that mean for the Boston Celtics? And it talks about, who's more important, Jaylen or Jason Tatum, but also, what type of ceiling does the team have now? Because they're both sort of peaking at a good time for them, if they can get back on the court together, of course. We've got a question from our very own Mike Miller, who I'm sure he sends apologies for not being here, but I didn't receive them. Mike Miller asked, is Zach LaVine real, and how good could he be elsewhere? I've got quick thoughts on this. He is for real in the sense that he's a greedy scorer, and no, he wouldn't be any better anywhere else. Gentlemen?
Wow, that was really strong. I feel like you were extra combative there because it was Mike sending that in. I love it. I think that LaVine is a really talented player. As Mike suggested, unfortunately, the Bulls are just definitely not for real. 45, 7 and 7 against the Clippers is what he had. So it wasn't just scoring, LaVine. He was unbelievable in that game against the Clippers. But he has to do a lot of the heavy lifting in that team. So yes, of course, he would probably be better and contribute to winning with a better team. But the stats would be far less impressive, of course, so it wouldn't show up on the sheet. I think he could help a team win, but he's not for real in the sense of like a star player in the league.
I remember having a conversation about LaVine with Mike on this pod way back now. I think it was last season, and I kind of am consistent with what I was saying then, where he had trouble with coaches, and I'm not. I don't think it's as negative as it's been made out, in that I think he's the type of guy who struggles with losing situations and with being on a bad team. And I don't hate that. We've seen similar things with Jimmy Butler, for example, where sometimes winning players just don't cope well in losing situations. Now, him as a player, I think he reminds me a lot of Monte Ellis, who a kind of really agile, gifted scorer who on the right team could be really effective, but if they're your best player and you don't have much else, you're not going very far. You're already seeing it with Chicago. You're not going to win many games. So a qualified yes for LaVine for me. I do like him, but as I say, if he's your best player, you're not the greatest team.
Yeah, I think that's where I stand on it. Is I admire his skill and brilliance in putting the ball in the basket, but as a number one option. That's not what I would aim for my basketball team roster construction. Breaking news, gentlemen. I don't know if you've seen in the Twitch chat, but Richard Fang, I'm not sure what his sources are, but he said Kyrie is out again tomorrow. So maybe that's a tweet that we haven't seen as we've been on air. But yeah, it looks as if that situation is continuing. As we continue, though, one more question from Rich Barrett. And I'm not sure if this is really a question for the pod or just a shout out for calling out a bad Christmas gift giver. Because obviously he hasn't received it yet and he's not very happy about it. But Rich Barrett said, I'm currently wearing my Seattle Supersonic stunt socks, which were a gift from Bryn Cooper. Apologies, I thought he said that he hadn't received it, but he has received them and he's very happy about it. So what's your most random but well-loved bit of merch?
Jeez. Random. I'm completely thinking off the cuff here. I'm even looking around the room. But I'm going to say I've got a little Al Horford plush toy of sorts. I don't know where it is. I think I might have given it to my girlfriend, who was a big fan of Al Horford, for eyelash reasons.
Understandable.
But, so I'm going to go with that.
Would you describe them as cat-like?
Well, whoever writes the article will have to look into that. He doesn't have whiskers, though.
Sorry, Huw, go ahead.
No, I was just going to invite you to talk. So you go ahead, Nick.
Okay, having just moved house, I did a big D stuff recently. So I've actually gone in a slightly different direction for this one. But I've got a bit of a show and tell. So these are Jordan 3 Tinker Hatfields, and the story behind these is that they reflect the original drawing Tinker Hatfield did. If you don't know, that's the guy who designed a lot of the most popular Jordan models. And he did the original sketch for the Jordan 3s that were slightly different from the end product made, but those are actually reflective of that original design. So I have those, and I had one other I just want to highlight, which was the Reebok Questions white on white, which is Iverson's first signature shoe, and the shoe he's wearing in those incredible videos, like crossing over Jordan and all of those sorts of things. So yeah, a couple of my favorite kicks at the moment.
Nick, can I just ask you a question? Who do you think you are? I come in with a plush toy and you dunk all over me with great disrespect. A fucking plush toy. What was I thinking? Go on, continue.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about the non-brand Lego men that I've got. And I think, in fact, we'll end the show on that very point. Nick basically dominating us in the kicks department. Congratulations! By the way, those Tinker Hatfield ones, like, I assume you don't wear them. Are they just for looking at?
No, I wear shoes are for wearing, mate. I always wear shoes. I'm not of the museum shoe type.
Good. Glad to hear it. So we're going to wrap up now. We're going to quickly talk about the games of the week. So these are the games that we as a team or individuals on this team, we pick you basically have to watch. Gentlemen, let's go to you first, Nick. Who have you got as your game of the week?
So I've actually used my Homer card on this one, where I've gone Knicks, and I think it's a really interesting dynamic now where actually, well, maybe it won't be if Kyrie plays in the game or doesn't play in the game, who knows? But you have the star-studded lineup in Brooklyn, obviously some of the most talented players in the league, versus the sort of lowly thought of Knicks, who are currently at least overachieving. Maybe we're seeing the start of a real rivalry in New York. Who knows? But a real one to watch for me. And
Josh?
I'm going to go with also the Nets. I've gone for the Nets Nuggets on Tuesday night, just because of the reasons that obviously that's changed now with Kyrie missing, but inconsistent teams that have, the incentive to make a statement.
Very good. And I'm going to go for the Battle of Europe, basically which star is going to take the European crown. So we've got Mavericks versus Bucks. That's on Friday night, Saturday morning at 12:30. I believe that's on Sky as well, so Sky Sports. So if you guys have that in the UK, then make sure you tune in. But I think we'll wrap it there, gentlemen. Thank you for your thoughts and your candor, and also your dose of reality with the importance of everything that's been going on in the world in the past week. But also thanks to everybody on the Twitch channel. If you don't normally follow us on the Twitch channel, I just want to give a quick shout out to it. We do this every week on Twitch at 9 p.m. We're meant to go for an hour, but we almost always go for like an hour. Well, tonight is hour and 15. Normally Mike goes like an hour and 40 because his timekeeping is terrible. But make sure you follow us on twitch.tv/doubleclutch UK. And I mentioned it earlier, but also follow us, join our Discord server, discord.me/doubleclutch. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook at Double Clutch. But guys, that's everything for tonight. Do you guys want to just give a quick shout out to your social handles as well as we do?
Yeah, I'll go at @Coyne, where you'll find a mixture of music, basketball, and football nonsense.
Yeah, you can find me at MJ Whitfield on Twitter, chatting all kinds of nonsense, NBA or otherwise.
And you can find me at The Hoops Nerd. Thanks very much, gentlemen, and thanks, Kirk, as ever. Captain Kirk in the background. You don't see him, but he's the one that makes basically this whole magic happen and brings us into your lives. So thank you for that, and we will see you next week.
Where's the lamb sauce?
Come on, man.
I just need a...
This is the lamb.
Where's the lamb sauce?